If you grew up in a public school or private school education model, you really only have one reference of how school can be done. It's Q&A Tuesday, which basically just means it's Tuesday, that's when this video is coming out, and I'm answering your questions over on Instagram all about homeschooling. So let's get into the video. Hey, my name's Heather and I'm a homeschooling mom of 3, and on this channel I do day in the life videos, curriculum reviews, and Q&A Tuesdays just like this. So if you're new to this channel and you want to be part of this community, go ahead and click that red subscribe button and you'll get notified when new videos come out. All right, so today's question comes from Coley over on Instagram, and she says, where do I start? Great question, Coley. Well, here's 3 of my best recommendations for how to get started. Number 1, if you want to get started in homeschooling and you have little ones who are not yet in school, my first recommendation is to find some great resources and start studying yourself. You know, if you grew up in a public school or private school education model, you really only have one reference of how school can be done. And so my first recommendation is to start diving into reading, listening to audiobooks, finding some blogs, watching videos like this on YouTube, and just starting to get yourself familiar with this new homeschool environment. What does it look like? What are your options? How can you get started? And that would be my first recommendation. And here's some books that I have that I think are really great for anyone who wants to start in this journey. The first one is from one of my favorite authors that I hope to have on the channel soon, and that is called The Read Aloud Family. Now, I love Sarah Mackenzie because she's a homeschooling mom herself, and she really is just speaking from truth. And one of the best ways to get started with homeschooling is actually just reading to your kids. I mean, it sounds crazy because our way that we think about school is that you need to be covering all these subjects, and it needs to be from 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and you need to have structure. And actually, when you start to look at how children learn, how our brains develop, and how we even as adults learn best, it's not actually when it's inside of a box. There usually is so much more that goes into learning. And one of the easiest ways to get started is just reading to your kids. It's a great way to explore literature. It's a great way to develop language. It's a great way to experience life through different stories. And this book I highly recommend because it's like the easiest way to get started is reading to your kids. And this book gives a wealth of information. And I'll put the description links down below to all the books and recommendations that I have today. If you want to go over and grab this on Amazon, Prime gets there in 2 days, right? So this is my first book. So the second book would be The Way They Learn. And there's a couple other books I'll put down in the description that are around this same concept. But one of the things when I first started in researching homeschool was being introduced to the idea that actually how the school system has designed education is not really how we learn. When you think about, having to put through hundreds of thousands of kids into a system, into a process, there's going to be a lot of holes within that process, and it really will only work for certain types of kids. There's only certain types of kids that work so well in a classroom, sit-down, workbook setting, and the majority of kids and adults don't really like to learn that way. And so one of the things I loved about this book, The Way They Learn, is it walks you through how to teach to your child's strengths. Now, in my homeschool right now, we have 3 kiddos, and they learn completely different. And so one thing that this book really helped me to learn was how to identify how each of my children learn, and being able to put resources and opportunities and experiences in front of them. And that's actually education. Again, when we think about the school system, it's been presented to us in a single model. And that model isn't the only model available. And when you think about how you flourish as an adult, the first thing is you want to learn something, so you go out and start learning it, right? If you want to learn how to sew, you'll probably start watching videos or get a book or ask a friend. And that is actually a great way to learn. And this book here helps you to learn how your kids like to learn and how to go deeper into their strengths. All right. The third book is a book that I am recommending to so many new homeschool mamas. and that's called Free to Learn. It's a super thin book, and this book opened my eyes actually to going beyond homeschooling. We've been a homeschooling family for years now, and it has evolved since the first videos that I've put out on this channel. I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, we don't even homeschool like that anymore, because this book, Free to Learn, really opened my eyes to the possibilities that are out there and really questioning the structure and the standards and the guidelines of education. And so this book here was really freeing to me, and I wish I would have read it when I first started homeschooling. So tip number one, start your researching, like get out there and start learning about all the options there are with homeschooling. Tip number two is you're going to need to figure out what your schedule is. So how do you start? Where do you start? You're really going to need to figure out and design a lifestyle around learning. Now, I think one of the biggest things about taking ownership of your child's education is being responsible for putting them into atmospheres and environments where they have opportunities to learn. So, I mean, a lot of the learning that we do in our homeschool actually isn't in our home. I mean, it is in our home, but we really are intentional about making sure that our schedules as a family, my husband and I, that those are able to impact our kids by putting them in great learning opportunities. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be structured things, but it's things like making sure that we're getting a lot of time in nature so that we can learn about science out in nature. Or it's making sure that we're going to the library consistently to get new books. Or it's making sure that we are spending time intentionally watching documentaries around the things that our kids love. So when I say where do you start, you don't necessarily need to plan your days from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in terms of school, but you do definitely need to say like, okay, when are we leaving the house? When are they having the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z that they're interested in? So tip number one, get yourself learning, sister. And tip number two is start to design your life around learning. And then the third tip that I would say is kind of a twofold. It's an A and B. A, you need to find out what your state standards are. So every state is different in terms of what is required. Every country is actually different on what is required. So you will want to research that. Super easy. You can type into Google your state name, homeschool standards, and they'll tell you what is required. Now, the state that I live in is a very lenient state when it comes to homeschooling, and we just need to sign a document and send in our scope and sequence. But there are states that do say that you need to, have attendance, you need to tell them what curriculum you're using, or you need to give them other things. And so you want to make sure you know your state or country standards related to that. So that's the A part of it. You want to know what is like legally required of you. And then the B part of it is just get started. I think when you are thinking about getting into homeschool, if you're anything like me, you want to have everything prepared. You want to know what curriculum you're using. You want to know when you're doing it. You want to have all the answers before you jump into it. And I can tell you from years of experience in this now that what I was doing back then is not even at all what we're doing now. And I wish I would have saved myself so much time and energy, and I would just love on my kids and prioritize relationships and prioritize seeing what they love to learn and really spent the time with them rather than becoming their teacher. I think when I said at the beginning I would do younger kids and older kids, we now as a family have 3 kids in our homeschool. We brought another little guy into our home in the last 9 months. And when you are jumping into homeschooling at an older age and they've had experience in school, you actually need to go through a process of what's called DSchooling. You can look it up. It's a process where you actually are you're not taking away school, and you're not like saying school's negative, but really when a child has been in a classroom style setting for so long, they're actually not taught to think. They're not taught to think about what they're interested in, and no one's really asking them, hey, do you want to learn this? It really is like they need to do this because that's what the teacher said, and that's what the school system has said, and that's the test they need to take, and there's a lot that goes into that. But there's a process called DSchooling where you really just want to allow your child to re-identify the intuition that they had when they were a kid, when they were little, and they were a toddler, and they just were curious about life and about learning. And you have to really start to dig that back up. So my third tip to you, that A and B, is you got to just start. And here's the thing, if it doesn't work out for you 1 year, your kids can go back to school. Like if it doesn't work for your family, that's okay. But I would say that your kids are only going to get older. And you're only going to have so many years that you can do this, that you can be with them every single day and experience life with them on such a major scale and be able to have a deep, consistent relationship with them that helps them start their life off well. And so that's my cue. That's my A to your Q. And I so appreciate you submitting that over on Instagram. And hey, if you're watching this video and you're getting value out of it, go ahead and click that like button because likes help us here on YouTube to show YouTube that this video is a thumbs up. That was corny. All right. Well, my question to you today is, are you starting homeschool? What are you scared of? And what are some apprehensions that you have about getting started? I'd love to make a video just for you. And if you have a question that you want to ask me, not here on YouTube, but over on Instagram, you can type it in that DM anytime and I will make sure to get an answer to you. Well, thank you so much for watching this video today. My name is Heather and I will see you on the next Q&A Tuesday. Bye.